Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, and today we've got another short update video on those blueprints we found of the ship's modifications that seem to date from around February 1981, when they're looking at how they want to update the ship for 80s services. In the last video, we talked a lot about these smaller documents. They were at the top of the box. I didn't have to unfold them. They were pretty quick to get to, and it looked like we had two sets of plans with like menu items of things that could be done. From super expensive and complicated, like removing turret 3, all the 5-inch guns, adding a hangar and vertical launch cells, to something not too far off from what the ship actually got, to removing all the 60-inch turrets and replacing their barbettes with vertical launch cells. So what we assumed in that video, and what we still believe is the case based on what we've seen, is that somebody had working drawings like this one set going around the office. They modify these for this set that's got the typed up stuff, and this was probably what they did as a presentation. I don't know if it was Secretary of the Navy Lehman or someone else. I've got to look into the 1980s update process for this ship some more, but this is going to help us figure out what the decision-making process was. It seems like they went through these and they decided that they wanted to take their detailed designs, not just these little 8.5 by 11 drawings, in two separate directions. And that seems to be what the rest of the blueprints we have are. All of these blueprints tend to relate to aviation stuff, I would say generically. So one stack, the smaller stack over here, these documents are probably, the longest one is 6 feet long, they're about 2 feet wide. These appear to be very similar to the Booklet of General Plans as actually done. So this seems to be the quote-unquote cheap option that they went with, the $300 million upgrade that the ship actually got. And at a brief glance, this seems to be pretty fully accurate. I'm sure there were some changes when they actually started the modification work. And they decided, this doesn't go here, or this is going to end up being 2 spaces instead of 1 space, things like that. But just at a glance, it looks pretty accurate. It looks like they took the original Booklet of General Plans and they blew it up or shrunk it down to whatever size they needed, and then they penciled in just the spaces that they were changing. And so some of the compartments here have labels, and most do not. And it might be that a couple of the major compartments also get named as well, but it seems to just be spaces that are being changed. And in addition to these, which I would call the preliminary Booklet of General Plans, there are a handful visual landing aids installation, arrangement of aviation repair shop and service center, visual landing aids and installation. And these seem to be the preliminary drawings for the aviation stuff that's actually installed on the ship today, the really limited helicopter control facilities, which were all installed and updated in the 80s. Prior to that, it had essentially been a guy with paddles on the flight deck doing all the work. So the modern system seems to be here. So I'm wondering if these blueprints came from somebody who did planning for aviation capabilities of the ship, and that's why the case is. That's why most of this stuff seems to focus on that. The other set we have is a significantly larger set of drawings that's also a very similar Booklet of General Plans style with various deck arrangements and with changes in it penciled out. And this seems to show what their final plan was going to be for if they paid more than $300 million to do this significant upgrade. My guess, this is just ballparking, this would probably be 4 times as expensive as what was actually done. I'm not a procurement guy, so take that with a complete grain of salt, but they didn't do this initially because of the cost. But obviously they kept the plans around, and I've often heard it said in other books that they had looked at this as a phase 2 modernization, possibly just for New Jersey. and so that's why there are some models of this that exist, although none of the models seem to match this drawing perfectly. Let me work my way around the table and we'll talk about some of the things on here. So, first off, we'll just go bow to stern on this guy. At the bow, where the 40mm guns originally were just forward of turret 1, this depicts a 30mm Gatling gun. It's Gaul 8, which is the Gatling gun in the nose of a A-10 Warthog. And I believe it's the same Gatling gun that's used in the British Goalkeeper Sea Whiz system. So it looks like they were looking at a Sea Whiz with more stopping power in this version of the ship. Now, 2 of the 5 mounts are forward of turret 1, and that's a terrible position. They would be absolutely swamped by water, and they would be damaged by the blast effect of the guns if the guns weren't firing true broadside. So maybe that's part of the reason why this study wasn't actually carried out. Maybe they would have done it and spent a ton of money and then realized that that was a tremendously bad idea and had to change things up later on. Then we got the turrets, nothing different there. The next 40mm position that's aft of turret number 2 on either side of the captain's and admiral's quarters up there on the O1 level, it's showing the Sea Sparrow missile system, which again, tremendously bad position for that because the overpressure from the guns would damage it, and that's why the Iowas ended up not getting Sea Sparrows. So that was never going to work out. So next labeled there's the Mark 92 CAS, parentheses N. That is a missile and guns fire control system used on the Perry-class frigates. And it even looks like they've got it on that like trestled stand that the Perrys have. We've actually got 2 of these shown on the blueprints, one on the aft mast, one forward where the Mark 37 director for the 5-inch guns are. So that must be for missiles. I'm guessing the SM-2 standard missile, because the Perrys have a 3-inch gun. There's no way that's directing the 16-inch guns. And none of these, there's separate directors shown here for the Sea Sparrows. The Tomahawks don't use a director like that. So it must be for standard missiles, which means that they're not planning on doing purely Tomahawks in the vertical launch tubes. They must be planning on having anti-air capability with the standard missiles there too. We've got SPS-53E, which is probably a surface search navigation set. We've got the original Mark 13 fire control system for the 16-inch guns. They've removed the aft one. The one on the forward superstructure is still there, so that must be what they're planning on using for the 16-inch guns. Now, interestingly, that has arms that come out the side, which are the optical rangefinder. The way the forward tripod is drawn completely differs from what the ship is actually built with, and it's significantly taller. As depicted, it doesn't appear like that rangefinder can actually traverse side to side. So either potentially they're cutting those arms off, they have the legs splayed much further than this depicts, or they didn't think that part through and the drawing just isn't accurate. Above that we have a big planar array called SPS-52N. Yeah, above that she's got an SPS-52N, which is her air search radar. So that's probably what's acquiring the air targets that she's going to be engaging. It's a 3-dimensional set as opposed to the 2D set that we actually get the SPS-49. And above that is the SPS-67, which is her surface search radar, attack and antenna. Interestingly, I find this really cool. The tripods are significantly taller than actually put on these ships, which means that they're not fitting under very many bridges. And also, interestingly, there's 2 tripods. There's one on the forward superstructure, and there's one just forward of and built into the forward face of the aft funnel. We'll talk about the aft one, and then we'll go back to some of the stuff we've missed here. So on the aft mast, We have URDL, UHF, \DFN. I don't know what the URD is, but UHF, ultra high frequency, direction finder. So that's probably helping aircraft get back to the ship if I had to guess. We have a Mark 23 TAS, which is a air search radar for sea skimming missiles. That's part of the Sea Sparrow system. SPN 35 dome. The Gator freighters have those for their vertical takeoff landing aircraft. So it helps Harriers and things like that land. That makes sense given the flight deck here. Second Mark 92 CAS, and then the Mark 106 Director for the Sea Sparrows. Interestingly, you can see on this scan that they had drawn that on the side of the tripod as if there were going to be one on each side, and then it looks like they erased that and then drew it again at the back of the tripod, indicating that there would be a single one on there. That's what it looks like to me, which makes sense. At this point, we have 3 of those Mark 106 bug-eye illuminators, and we have 3 Sea Sparrow mounts. So you've got 1 illuminator per mount. So now dropping back down, the forward funnel where the Mark 37s are for the 5-inch guns that have been removed. There's another one of those bug-eye illuminators on each side, like we were just talking about. All the 5-inch guns are gone, and they've been replaced by those 3-story tall vertical launch cells. Each one can hold 16, and it looks like they've got room for 4 on each side, which gives these ships 128 vertical launch cells, the same as a Ticonderoga class cruiser. So we are combining a Ticonderoga's firepower, 2/3 of a battleship's armament, and an air group that's approximately the size of a Gator freighter with about 25 vertical takeoff and landing aircraft on it. So they are really going to the nines. What impresses me the most is that they're looking at anti-aircraft capability. We've got no secondary capability. This seems to be a lot less oriented for gunnery surface action and a lot more oriented for defense and offense with the ship's missile systems, as opposed to what the ship actually gets. The aftmost 5-inch mount, of course, is completely deleted and doesn't get vertical cells in this modification. It all goes to the flight deck. The flight deck comes just about to the aft funnel with a hangar that's about 2 stories tall beneath that. Now, interestingly, underway replenishment is going to be via sponson on the starboard side, as opposed to what we have, and this is almost certainly receiving and not sending fuel, because some of the 2.5 million gallons of fuel that this ship can handle is going to be converted to aviation gasoline. So we're no longer going to have the refueling capabilities that she actually is built with in the 80s to refuel her escorts. And really, in this configuration, all she needs is an anti-submarine escort, although her aviation component might be able to do a lot of that for her. Aft of the funnel, or on either side of the funnel, in that old triple stack 40mm tub, at the top is one of those 30mm Sea Whiz. Interestingly, it doesn't get the whole built-up structure that the ship actually gets to raise those Sea Whizzes up to 05 level. Instead, it's still down on. Down a level where it originally would have been. It looks like. Looks like actually they shift that tower back a little bit from where it would have originally been. You can see where they erased the original one on there. So that's kind of interesting. So this ship has 5 of them, the 2 in the forward position, the 2 here at the mast, and then 1 aft of the aft funnel. Above the aft Sea Whiz mount is the aft Sea Sparrow mount. So we've got 3 Sea Sparrow launchers too, plus standard missiles. So we got tremendous anti-air and anti-missile capabilities on this ship, plus the electronics to guide it and detect stuff. And then, of course, the flight deck and hangar dominate the back of the ship, which lean off to the side. These blueprints are significantly bigger than any of the other ones in the box, and it's going to be a pain for us to be able to scan them. Under this, we've got some blueprints of the hangars, the main deck and inboard side profile, which does not depict the ship's masts, but does depict all the other changes. So this set of blueprints seems to go together, and it does have a better depiction of those vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that we talked about in the last episode that are not Harriers. My friend Noah from the aviation community thinks that these are closer to the McDonnell Douglas Model 260 as opposed to the Grumman I mentioned in the last video. Both of these aircraft have lots of different concept art for what they look like, and I honestly can't tell the difference between the two. Can tell the difference between two sister ship battleships, but ask me anything about cars, planes, tanks, that sort of stuff, and I'm lost. They all look the same to me. It is some type or another of experimental vertical launch aircraft that's being developed in the late 70s, early 80s. The blueprints seem to list it as AEW, Airborne Early Warning. However, the plans here show quite a few of them, which makes me wonder if they're going to be used in the bomber capability as well, with the AV-8 Harriers operating as the fighter component. But interestingly, it's a mixed air group, and it doesn't seem to depict any helicopters. It does have two elevators, one on the starboard side and one all the way back aft. The starboard side offset one seems to be partially where the 16-inch turret is. So unlike older BattleCarrier designs where they leave the barbettes there and use that as magazine spaces, it seems like they're going to have to remove the barbette entirely in order to put the aircraft elevator countersinking area and machinery into that space, which is a huge modification to the ship and is really going to structurally change her. The most interesting thing I think is on these plans is they're heavily ballasting up forward. They're showing the two peak tanks as being filled with freshwater ballast. They'd normally be empty, and it's showing one of the other lower spaces here between frame 20 and frame 28 as being filled with concrete ballast to add more weight to the bow of the ship, which is really confusing to me. I know the ships sit upright normally, but we're removing well over 2,000 tons with turret 3 and its barbette being removed from back aft. And you can see where the barbette space is around frames 150 to 165. Aircraft elevator machinery, aircraft elevator machinery, aircraft magazine, JP5 pump room, and the barbette itself is no longer there. So it's really confusing to me that they're removing all this weight back aft, but still adding more weight forward. So maybe they are doing some weight calculations with this? I'm just not sure. Interestingly, as completed, even though dead weight, they're 10 feet higher in the bow, no concrete ballast is added to the Iowas as far as I know in their actual completed modifications. So our next step is, of course, going to be to scan these. These far exceed the size of any scanners we have now that we've actually got them open and looking at them. So it's going to cost some money to do that. And we're going into our winter slow season, so I'm not sure when that's going to happen. This is something that's on the top of my priority. We are going to document this and get it out there. It's just not going to happen anytime soon, so bear with us. This is really cool looking at what could have been. What are some of the concepts here that you think are good ideas or bad ideas? Let us know in the... what are some of the comments here that you think are either good ideas or bad ideas? Let us know in the comment section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to support our ongoing work in the collection spaces, which is bringing to light new objects like this that's helping us understand the ship better. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.